Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It is Monday, December 30th. That means that this is our last podcast of 2024. It's our Hoops HD Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, with a cast of thousands here tonight. We got John Teitel and Matt Sikowski up here with me, Mike Cha in the center square, Joby Fortson and Rocco Miller joining us from Bracketeer.org. And then way down the bottom there,
I'm here
unfortunately, we
too.
also have David Griggs
I'm here.
without video again, thankfully, as well.
Can you let me out of here?
No.
There's no why do I always get locked up during the holidays?
And we do have a buzzer as well. We've got a lot to, well, we don't actually have a lot of games to get to. This was a late week for college basketball. We've got a lot of topics we want to cover tonight, but I thought before we got to anything else tonight, we would start out with some pretty sad news here as college basketball fans. The man who was, he's coming up on the screen right there, he was the voice of the selection special, the voice of March Madness, great career as an NFL broadcaster as well. Greg Gumbel did pass away this week. And I know a few of you had some comments on him, beginning with Tytel. I know you had some thoughts about this loss here for the college basketball community and the sports community and the world.
And the universe. So after college and grad school, I would tune into CBS on Selection Sunday to see, selfishly, if Arizona or Penn made it and who they'd be facing. And then for the past several years, I'd obsess over it to see if my predictions were good enough to make me the seventh best bracket matrix contestant in the country. Spoiler, they were, and I am. The one constant during this whole period was Gumbel, the studio host for CBS's coverage. And I haven't watched every single Super Bowl in my lifetime, and occasionally I'll have a schedule conflict with the NBA draft, but I'm pretty sure I've watched every single Selection Sunday this century. And some might argue that all Gumbel did was read the names of the teams off the teleprompter, but for me and a lot of other people, it really was must-see TV. So RIP, GG.
Yeah, he really was. And I mean, more than just college basketball, the NFL, my understanding was he was the first African American play-by-play in the Super Bowl, play-by-play announcer for the Super Bowl. Um, and, but really, as a college basketball fan here, this was the voice. And I'm sure anybody else that wants to chime in here and any thoughts about him, please feel free to.
One of the things I just remember about watching the NCAA tournament 30 years ago, and maybe even a little further back, was it was pre-direct TV, or at least before satellite TV was commonplace. And when I was a kid, I had in my head that he was the one that got to decide who got to watch what, because he was the one that would always interrupt the coverage and jump in. And I wanted that job. But yeah, I mean, he was synonymous with March Madness and CBS's coverage of the tournament.
Yeah, and he will definitely be missed. And our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and friends and everyone at CBS as well. But we do want to get to the game itself, and we've got a bunch of action we want to go over. And I thought we'd start things off today over in the Big Ten, which, while there wasn't a ton of very notable games this past week, one of the very notable ones that was played was the UCLA Gonzaga game on Saturday. And Joby, I wanted to start with you also because I know you had a few thoughts on this UCLA team uh, and their win over Gonzaga, and that amazing shot that Gonzaga took to try to tie the game with 4 seconds left on the clock.
He was open. He was open.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It's better than not taking a shot at all, which is letting it run out. So I guess there's now I wanted to kind of focus on UCLA because with the win, UCLA's had a pretty decent out of conference run here on the strength of the games, et cetera. And that Gonzaga win, especially on the heels of the Carolina loss, but when you combine the Gonzaga win with the Oregon win, all of a sudden they have two really nice protected seed level type wins. And this is the sort of building block that as they go into Big Ten play, which will have a lot of opportunities against tournament level teams, UCLA is primed to do in just a few weeks. That Gonzaga win propels them from the middle of the pack in the field to, in my opinion, as of today, I think they are a protected seat. And that's how one win, especially out of conference, can affect a team. Ironically, I think they jumped the Zags for that last spot, you could argue. But this UCLA team, Johnson's been very solid for them. That this is a team that started off, ho hum. They had the New Mexico loss, et cetera, but now they are ready to roll. And I think the Big Ten better watch out because, like I said, they already have a major scalp within the Big Ten regarding the Oregon.
Yeah, that win at
Ironic.
Oregon, it's a singular win. Might be it's probably not the most impressive singular win that anyone has, but it's on a very very short list of really really good wins. And yeah, you mentioned that they started off ho hum. Since they lost to that game in New Mexico on November 8th. From November 9th on, they've been as good as anyone in the country. They have one loss. It was North Carolina by 2 points. They have beaten Gonzaga. They won at Oregon. They beat Arizona. And while there's been a share of pastry cart wins too, that's an impressive hell of a run.
Yeah. Well, what about that Oregon team? And Rocco, let me bring you in on the Ducks here because that UCLA loss is their only loss, and you want to talk about impressive resumes. I think you do even better when we look at the right hand side of the screen over here.
Yeah, I mean, winning the Players Era tournament is going to go a long ways, and they've already got a road win at USC, which I think could age better. That looks like a team that could come along as the year goes on. Obviously, all new players there and extremely athletic and versatile. On top of that, they've been able to start dominating some of these inferior teams. I think that will be important for their confidence. Pummeling Weber State on Sunday, obviously a 15-point win the weekend before over Stanford right here in San Jose. So those games that could have been, tests, close calls, they've been handling their business really well. And really curious to see if they can sweep the Illinois-Maryland duo that are coming to Eugene starting on Thursday.
I think
that is interesting. And Matt, let me ask you about that Maryland team that he just mentioned here. I pulled them up on the left-hand side. This is a team that I got laughed at preseason for saying that I thought this team was going to be pretty good. Are you among the people who have changed their mind and coming over to my side of the aisle here on Maryland?
Yeah, first of all, it's one of those. I would have probably been fairly neutral on them going into the year, but no, they're really good. Like I got to witness it firsthand. Marquette survived that game, but that was a close game. Maryland's really talented, and I think at some point, I think their resume metrics will start to show up more like the predictive metrics, where I think the predictive metrics are a better measure of what they are currently.
Yeah, you look at that. Torvik has a 15th of the nation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg. Your question.
How good do you think they are? I agree that they're a lot better than what I thought. But when you look at, at Washington, that's tough but winnable. At Oregon, I think you're shooting at the moon at that one. Can they get UCLA at home? Are they good enough to get that?
I don't know that they are. I never said preseason that this was a protected seed type of team. I thought it was an NCAA tournament team, and they clearly look like one so far. That's all I was going with this.
I agree with you on that. I don't. They're not a protected seed, and they're not going to be the protected seed on the road. I don't think, but I do think that, in their next four, if you look at the stretch of their next 6 games, if they win 4 of those, that's an NCAA tournament level team.
Yep. If they 4 of those next, if they win 4 of those, there's a lot of good wins in there. Let me throw one other team over here. A couple of teams, actually. First of all, Mike, you are a Michigan guy. I pulled them up on the right-hand side. How about your Wolverines this year? They are on the cusp of being in the top 25 right now, but just out of it.
Yeah, I'm surprised their net ranking 17, but I think the thing is that when they win, they win so convincingly. Like last night, they won by almost 50 points. The thing is, the 3 losses, they've had double-digit leads in all 3 of those games, and they just fell apart down the stretch. So it's like they could, they could easily be undefeated, but then, like you said, you can't. It's not good enough just to be close. You got to win those games. But if they can just cut down on the turnovers, they should be fine.
Well, what about this having to do with the USC UCLA road trip now, just to start the main stretch of
that's going
conference
to be
play?
tough. I mean, that's going to be tough because you're facing 2 good teams, especially UCLA, but also the travel. This is going to be interesting with the Big Ten. How our team's going to handle traveling 3 time zones, and that goes for the same for the West Coast teams when they have to come out to the east side of the country.
I guess one thing I would say is you get that trip over with now while you're actually still in winter break, as opposed to hitting it in the middle of February or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Titel, one other team we mentioned briefly that UCLA's next game up is going to be against Nebraska. I'll pull them up on the right. I know you had a few thoughts on the Huskers, who actually were picked up a maybe a notable win over this past week, beating Oregon State.
I mean, who's having a better holiday week than Fred Hoiberg? A trio of top 200 wins at the Diamond Head Classic to improve to 10 and 2 overall. They're hosting Southern as we speak. They're leading, but it's early. They host UCLA this Saturday, and the star of the show has been senior guard Bryce Williams. He's been more of a passer during his first 4 seasons. He started at Charlotte before ending up in Lincoln, but he's exploded this year as a scorer. 20 points a game, and the shooting numbers are amazing. 51% from the field, 43% behind the arc, 91% at the free throw line. And you should keep an eye on him, not just now, but in March, because he's proven that he plays his best in tournament settings. 2023 CBI MVP, and last week, the Diamond Head MVP.
Yeah, there is the rest of the standings in this conference. I think that covers a lot of the teams. There's a lot more stories we could definitely go into, such as Penn State, Titel knocking off your Penn Quakers to improve to 11 and 2.
Present.
But I will give a shout out to the Big Ten for going undefeated over this holiday week, including my Rutgers Scarlet Knights taking care of a pretty good Columbia team today. But
Yeah.
upcoming schedule, other than the Southern Nebraska game that's going on right now, and I think it's just very, very early in that game. We're about to get into conference play for the rest of the way here, so things are about to get really interesting here in the Big Ten. Great, it's a conference though that there's I mean, maybe you throw out Minnesota and everybody else is right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's in the top 100 except Minnesota.
Yeah, and some of the teams that have not caught fire yet, I don't think that you should take what Rutgers did today lightly. I know it was Columbia. I know that they were favored to win, but it's not. It's a pretty good Columbia team, and Rutgers beat them pretty convincingly after losing to Princeton earlier. Is Rutgers finally starting to hit their stride and grow up a little bit toward the end of the winter break? And can they string together the wins they need to get inside the bubble? I think they can. I'm not giving up on them. I don't like you, but I like them.
The Rutgers' next game Thursday night at Indiana, and we know that Rutgers has owned the entire state of Indiana for several years now. So
I think they win that. Indiana is a team I'm big on. So, yeah, I think they can win that.
let's. There's actually some interesting games here. The Friday night doubleheader: Michigan State, Ohio State, Iowa, Wisconsin's another couple games to pay attention to. But let's jump over to the Big 12 conference. And Rocco, let me go back to you. This Iowa State team is sitting here at 10 and 1 overall, and I mean I'm hearing people calling them, 1A with a team like Auburn for the best in the nation, regardless of where Tennessee might be ranked. Is this Iowa State team that good?
Potentially. I think
Okay.
top five is warranted based on how they finished last year, and based on what they've shown so far. Obviously, the only loss was a tough battle with Auburn, playing Auburn all the way to the wire on a neutral court, which nobody else really was able to do. Auburn's only loss, of course, in Cameron. So, it's still wait and see, though, because the Big 12 is going to present so many tough road trips beginning tonight. I mean, I would not overlook Colorado. I know the game just tipped off, but that's a very difficult place to play. They already played each other in Maui. It's going to be much different circumstances tonight. When they played in Maui, it was the third game in 3 days. Guys were gassed. The rotations were a little bit crooked. Tonight, both teams are well rested over a week off and a lot of prep. And Iowa State is not used to going to altitude in their league. They now have to do that. Colorado, of course, has historically had one of the best home court advantages in the country. So I'm curious about how they even perform today, let alone tomorrow. But I do think, they'll go to Texas Tech in 2 Saturdays. There's a lot of tough road games. They'll go to Arizona this month. So just this month, I think we will, and I'm saying that as if we're already in January, we're going to learn a ton about the Cyclones. They have Kansas in the middle of January as well.
Yeah, and there are several Big 12 games going on as we record this. It's around 9:20 p.m. Eastern right now.
Yeah.
But Joby, one of those games that's going on right now is already a no contest. Houston is up big on the road at Oklahoma State in their conference opener. And this is a Houston team. I think we mentioned it last week also that people have almost forgotten. And maybe it's because they just didn't pick up a major non-conference win.
Yeah.
But they also did not. Don't have a bad loss.
Yeah, they didn't play the out of conference schedule that they normally do, but that's because they're not in the American anymore. They don't need to do that. It's not like they avoided tough games. I mean, playing the two Alabama schools and San Diego State, that's solid. And Butler's decent. Notre Dame's not, but Houston is going to be fine. They are, they're a tournament level team. They will get opportunities in the Big 12. Oklahoma State's not really somebody to write home about. They should win that on the road in Stillwater. But it's down the road where you see the BYU game. K-State had a nice win tonight. West Virginia is a tournament team. We were discussing this pre-call. They're going to get opportunities in this conference. And as long as they do what Houston has done over the last several years, Houston has a shot. Not saying they will because they're on the outside looking in right now, but they still have a shot at getting up into the protected seed line. They just need to do extremely well in conference to do it. And they have the capability, I think, and the talent to do so.
Yeah, Tell he mentioned West Virginia. I know you had a few thoughts on the Mountaineers, who I pulled up there on the right with only the 2 losses on the season.
This team only won 9 games last year, but Darian DeVries matched that number before Christmas. Just an unbelievable first-year coach, which, of course, I love. What's even more impressive, he had to replace the entire roster. As to whether I think he can get win number 10 on New Year's Eve on the road at Kansas, not so much. They've been doing it with defense, top 30 in the nation in field goal percentage allowed from both 2-point and 3-point land. And as Joby noted earlier, who would have thought that beating Georgetown this month would actually help somebody's resume? Darian's son Tucker is still out with an upper body injury. I've seen rumors that he might even take a medical red shirt, God forbid. But that puts even more pressure on Oklahoma State transfer guard Javon Small, who's leading the conference, 20 points a game, and has made 55 of 63 at the free throw line so far.
Yeah, I'll go back to the standings here. One final before we started this. It's the first game of the conference season, and Matt, it was Kansas State with a home win over Cincinnati, and someone should screenshot this because this is the only time I think Kansas State will be anywhere but the bottom of the standings, maybe all season. What does it say about Cincinnati?
Below them.
the Cincinnati maybe home court heroes and a little bit of computer checkers there that they're not anywhere near the protected seed that at least the computer numbers earlier in the year show that they're more, right. If they get in, definitely more back half of the field.
Well, Chad, you were skeptical of them all year long. You were skeptical of them back in October. And while I don't want to admit that you're right, I will say that the time we spent together has made you smarter, and that's why you were new to be skeptical of them. But they haven't beaten anybody other than the neutral floor win against Dayton was nice. And when you look at the rest of their schedule, all of their remaining games appear to be harder than all of their previous games. I don't think they're going to be inside the bubble come March.
Oh, look at those last 2 games of the season, K-State and Oklahoma State. Until then, Joby, let me ask you real quick on Cincinnati also. Your J&G, normally you're fairly close to the other resume-based metrics. And in this case, you and the KPI are way apart on Cincinnati, which almost surprises me when I see 2 of the resume metrics that far apart from each other.
I will trust mine. I can tell you why. Yeah. It's because entering tonight, this doesn't include the game tonight. I have a feeling they will tumble at least 10 spots after tonight, maybe more, given the case Kansas State's net isn't that strong. Isn't that strong. So this is going to be a big hit. The reason why is because their lack of losses. At this stage, the J&G, if you have 1 loss and a tournament win, Dayton, is a good win, then it's like, wow, that's okay. Notice they're a 6 seed here with 1 loss. If you project out that they were going to continue against a schedule like that, which isn't great, but not awful, and continue to do that with only 1 loss, maybe pick up another, that's going to be a team that's going to be solidly in the field wearing white. That's where they are right now, pre-K-State. But like I said, expect to see them probably still in the field after tonight, but now they're no longer going to wear white.
Let me ask you this, Joey, because while you have a resume metric as is the KPI, you're measuring different things. You're measuring what you think the selection committee will do,
Right.
and one of the things that might be sending them high in your rankings that the KPI doesn't notice is that number before their name, the number 16. Is that playing into why they're high in the JNG?
It is a baseline factor. It's not the baseline factor. I want to stress that, but
Yeah.
it does go into the metrics, but it's kind of a minor component. Griggs, it's not, it'll influence it a little just because we have had a record of only twice now has a top 25 team missed the
Yeah.
tournament.
I
So
think in 93 UNLV and was it
New
2004
Mexico,
Utah State?
Murray
New
State
Mexico,
was
New
Murray
Mexico.
State was in the top 25 and missed it just a few years ago.
Yeah. So the and so it's a small factor. The bigger factor is the resume itself. It's still
Okay.
the resume itself. Yeah, I think the biggest reason there is entering today one road loss in tier one. I know Villanova's not a tournament team, but it is tier one, it's lower half of tier one, and a win against the field. That's the type of resume that a mid tier above the midpoint in the bracket usually gets, not protected seed, but they need more. But and they'll get the opportunity for it. But tonight was a bad night for them.
Here is the upcoming schedule for the Big 12. After tonight's games is a whole, I guess, four more games tomorrow. Mike, one team we haven't even mentioned yet in the entire show, number seven in the nation, the Kansas Jayhawks. Obviously, they didn't play the past week, but they start conference play with West Virginia, and they follow that up with a game at UCF on Sunday.
I mean, Kansas is the team that, because of their past that I give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's going to be really tough. We'll see what West Virginia is made out of this coming Tuesday. If they can beat Kansas, that would be huge. But yeah, Kansas is the team that, I definitely give the benefit of the doubt just because they've proven themselves so many times during the regular season.
Yeah, and there's a lot of fascinating games actually Saturday. You got to highlight Baylor, Iowa State. You got to look tomorrow night, tomorrow even at Arizona State, BYU, and
BYU Houston's a good one.
BYU. This Big 12 is going to be fun this season. I think it always is, but maybe not as fun as the SEC, which shockingly the conference actually suffered a loss this week, which only happens once a month in a non-conference play apparently so far this year. But why don't we start out? We've got three undefeated teams still in this conference. I think there's four in the nation, and three of them are in this league. If I'm correct,
Yeah.
these three are Drake.
Three of the top four in the net. My
And
goodness.
if all three of those teams finish the regular season undefeated, I am telling you, this conference is going to be on fire.
Rocco, I want to start with you though in the SEC on the team that I think is one of almost not getting enough attention, even though they're undefeated. The Oklahoma Sooners. I don't know that we're expecting much out of this team this year, and I think it's been almost one of the bigger surprises in college basketball how well this team has been playing.
Yeah, I mean, the 13 and 0, a bunch of bye wins, a nice break in the battle for Atlantis, but they got all those wins, and they've demonstrated the art of winning close, which is a huge factor in all
4-point
leagues.
play. R.
So I would just say, I liked that they dominated the Oklahoma State game. That's always a tough rivalry game. They owned it. The Michigan game was crazy, as Michael will tell you. Both teams had monster leads, and then Oklahoma pulls it out by 1 point in the end. So there was a lot of chances for them to lose, but they pulled them all out so far. I just have a feeling, if you did a power rankings of the 16 teams in this league, Oklahoma might still be in my bottom half. That's how good the league
It definitely would be in mine.
Yeah. So, it reminds me of a Washington team that had Robert Upshaw back in the day. I try to remember what year that was. They also started 13 and 0 and then went into the Pac-12 and got absolutely killed and didn't even come close to making the tournament after their 13 and 0 start. I could see that happening to this team, but at the same time, I don't want to put that on Oklahoma's fault. It's just that's how good the SEC is coming in.
Hey, Rocco, you wouldn't be the only one that say the bottom half. The net would have them as the 5th lowest team.
There you go.
Yeah,
So it's not far-fetched, right? And they open up
the net. I think takes
Alabama,
too much.
It's going to be brutal.
Yeah, the net takes too much into point differential, I think, here. But still, the point is made. I think it's well made by you. That we'll see how the rest of the season plays out.
But you look at it.
In theory, you cannot pick up a bad loss because everybody's in the top 100.
It was in the top 85. I mean,
Top
that
85.
is insane
Yeah.
right now.
I think what Joby alluded to is right because like a lot of teams' records look clean, but once you get into conference play, that there's going to be a lot of cannibalism, and it's going to separate the men from the boys, the wheat from the chaff, whatever you want analogy you want to put. Once you get into conference play.
I would say on the positive side, though, I don't want to just be negative because they deserve a lot of credit. Jeremiah Fears is a guy that, I think he's committed to 3 or 4 schools last year. He ends up landing at Oklahoma. He's just one of several freshmen across the country. It's a great year for freshmen. Again, with the NBA draft looming, with all the distractions of NIL, with all the other teams, not all, but a majority of the other teams being so much older and more mature, you just wonder if that is sustainable all the way till March. But what a great story he's been. He's one of the best players, not only for the freshman class, but in the country. And, the 4 MVP awards he has from Ken Palm so far speak volumes. He's been a pretty flawless, productive player.
We could probably spend another 3 more hours on this conference. Let's go a couple other teams, though. Titel. LSU, a team that we haven't really discussed much at all this year. They're actually second worst behind South Carolina in the net ratings, and probably one of only 2 teams that would not have in the field right now.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about them before their schedule got any worse, frankly. Coach Matt McMahon only won 17 games last year, 11-2 after a 65-point nail-biter over MVSU last Sunday. The strength of schedule has been terrible, but each of their 18 games in conference play, Ken Palm top 65 opponent or better. So we'll see what they're made of every single night going forward. The defense has been great, top 20 in the nation in field goal percent allowed from both 2-point and 3-point land. And they had a nice scoring balance of 5 guys averaging 10 to 17 points a game until Jalen Reed tore the ACL in his right knee earlier this month. He's out for the year, unfortunately. And in a league with a bunch of great freshmen, Asa Newell, Boogie Flan, and the one who Rocco just mentioned, Jeremiah Fears, one of the greatest 6'5" shooting guard, Victorious Miller, 12 points a game on 51% shooting. So the lesson, as always, if you want your team to be victorious, then make sure you recruit guys named victorious.
There you go. I gotta say also though, I pulled up the Texas profile on the right there, and Titel, I'll give you a shout out for pointing this out. Look at this next 5 games: at number 22, home against number 1, home against number 2, at number 41, at number 4. That's what life in the SEC is going to be this year. And I think we keep circling around to the question here, and maybe Joby, as a metrics guy, that's a good question for you, is how much will these teams really cannibalize themselves? And is this going to be a 14-bit league, or are we going to end up with 10 because there's just going to be too much cannibalization?
Overall record will matter. For instance, if LSU or Texas or South Carolina fall 6 below 500, which just
in conference,
6 below 500 in the conference, that's going to hurt you. I mean, it just is inevitably. But yes, you could see if it works out. Like it seems like the Mountain West, my favorite book, always seems to work it out perfectly to have the maximized bids. If they wanted to maximize bids in this league, first of all, sorry South Carolina, you won't win again.
Yeah. but let me throw it out there. If you go 6-12 in this conference, it's an 18-game season.
Yeah.
You could be sitting there at 17-14. Maybe you win 2 games in the conference tournament.
17-15, you're not getting in.
One's better be darn good, Chad.
But what if you win 1 or 2 in the conference tournament? Now you get something like 19-15.
I think you're going to have other teams from other leagues that would do it. But let me point out one thing. You mentioned the Texas schedule, which I think is excellent. The 2 road games, don't poo-poo them. It's at A&M, at Oklahoma. From a perspective,
their 2 biggest rivals.
That's really tough, more than it is like if it were Alabama doing that.
I gotta say, if Texas can win one of these next 5 games, I give them. I think it's a success.
Exactly. Yeah, but we're going to see some teams are just going to fall off. I mean, and we don't know exactly who. I mean, hell, South Carolina just
Aren't
beat
they
up a
all
very
quad
good
one
Clemson
games?
team.
Am I
It's
eyes
not like
deceiving?
South Carolina
Yeah, are
State.
they all quad one games?
Yes, there's going to be so much, and that's what I'm saying here. Rocco, you're a bracket guessing expert. Again, even if you go 6-12 in this conference with the number of quad one games you're going to be playing, and you end up maybe 5 games over 500 overall with a conference tournament win or two. I mean, could we really see a team that goes 6-12 in conference play
Yes.
in the NCAA tournament this year?
It's possible, but the full body of work is still
Mhm.
just as important.
Yeah.
So, like, take Texas, for example, right now. Like, you get rid of those 8 quad 4 wins they have. They're 3-2, basically, the way I see it. So they can't afford to go 6-12 and get in, because that would make them 9-14 in meaningful games. They're not taking a team 5 games under 500 in meaningful games. But if a team enters league play 6-0 right now, they can afford to go 6-12. So it's all about the body of work, and you've got to dismiss the Q4 results.
Yeah, their non-conference
Mississippi
strength of schedule
Valley,
isn't very good. That's not going to help.
Mississippi Valley may end up on our board panel as the centenary representative.
Yeah.
Well, and Rocco's, let me add one cherry to what Rocco was saying. In the past, we've seen a conference similar to this in the past. About 2 to 3 years ago, the Big 12 had a lot of similarities this year, SEC, and they did not take Oklahoma State. They did not. There were two Big 12 teams in a very similar position, and because they didn't have that out of conference resume that Rocco is referring to, and I think that's a very wise way to look at it, they were left out, even though you could make very strong arguments. So they had to win over Kansas, or I don't remember the exact, but they will get. They will not get the benefit of the doubt over a Drake that loses their conference tournament and goes 27-5. Drake will
I
get
don't think Drake will be near
Drake will get the bid in that.
But
Anyhow,
I think that's the main thing too. Is like, if you're in those 3 leagues, SEC especially, but I'd also add the Big 10 and Big 12. I think they're still both strong enough to where you're going to just have so many results that at a certain point, the quad 1 wins are not going to blow you out of the water. What's going to blow you out of the water is if you went like 13-10 in those games, or if you went 10-13 in those games. Not because you have so many chances at them, you're going to win a couple. Whereas if it's Atlantic 10 team and Dayton knocks off somebody awesome, that's like they hold on to that all year like a piece of gold. But in those 3 leagues, it's all about your differential around 500 in the meaningfuls.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Anyhow, here's the upcoming schedule for the SEC. Beginning Saturday with conference play, I highlighted the games that are worth watching. Also, throw in there tomorrow night, Norfolk State of Tennessee. Don't overlook that completely. Do not be surprised if it's close at the half. It's close at the
Norfolk
half.
State. That's a perfect 1v16 game in around the 64 type of game.
And it could be a one. Well, they don't do regular season rematches. Otherwise, it could be a 116 game. Big East Conference time, and Matt, let me start with you being a Big East guy here, where we now live in a world where Georgetown is on the top of the screen, but we're I mean, we didn't really see much in terms of action this past week, but what have you seen? Where are you looking at in the Big East here?
I would see can a 4th team join Marquette, St. John's, and UConn as a serious tournament threat. There isn't there right now. Now, what the conference has done is most of it's crept up to at least being a Q1 or very close to a Q1 road game. So that's actually good news, say, for the Marquette, UConn, and St. John's, who I think can win most of those games still. And therefore, hey, when it's coming time to see if you can be a protected seed, you'd say, hey, you're 6-4 or 6-4 or 7-3 against Q1 because you won a bunch of games in the 60s, but it's still Q1.
Yeah, when you look at this league here, I think you're right. I mean, right now, Los Titel, we know that there are 3 good teams, one of them being Marquette.
We do. Shaka made the Sweet 16 last March. You might do it again in 2025. When your only road losses are Iowa State and Dayton, you're doing pretty good. And I don't know about Matt. I really thought they would take a step backwards after losing Oso Ighodaro and Tyler Kolek to the NBA. but I did not think that Cam Jones could take it up a couple of notches and be a potential All-American. He was primarily a scorer over the past 2 years because Kolek was the passer, but he's stuffing the stat sheet this season. 20 points, 5 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals a game while shooting 54% from the field.
And so I think the period when Kolek went down, Cam Jones had to basically slide over the point guard because Sean Jones was also out for the year and actually might just be coming back. But for the Cam Jones, he basically proved he could play point guard in those games. And that, I think, A, made sure Shaka did his usual, didn't go into the portal, and B, gave me confidence. I didn't think Marquette would be quite like top 10 good, but I thought right on the border of protected seed, so like 4 or 5 going into the year.
Yeah,
I think they're top 10 good.
well, I guess the question though, kind of going back to that question though, beyond Marquette, St. John's, UConn, Rocco, does Creighton get back in this thing? Is there somebody else we're looking at? Is it Georgetown?
Yeah, I would say the 3 I'm looking at the closest right now, maybe even 4, but they have a lot of work to do. Creighton, Villanova, and then maybe Georgetown, Xavier. I'm really impressed with what Xavier has done without Fremantle. Unfortunately, they lost both those great efforts, but played really, really well in those last 2 performances against arguably or probably agreeably the best 2 teams, UConn and Marquette. So we'll see if Xavier can sustain that. They'll need to. But then, Creighton, Villanova, obviously Villanova's had their struggles early, but they've played pretty well the last month. So we'll see what they can do in tight games. And then Creighton, same thing, getting back to somewhat health is obviously paramount. No more Pop Isaacs, of course, but I thought they looked pretty good their last couple of performances. And then Georgetown, the story there with Thomas Sorter, been an awesome story. We'll see how sustainable it is, but they're certainly competitive. And I think those are the teams to watch. But right now, maybe all of them would be out. It's just way too early in the season, in my opinion, to have that.
Oh, I think I would be stunned if a 4th Big East team made it at the moment.
Well, this is the huge
week
for
Creighton. Selection Sunday, yeah.
This is the week for Creighton, though. They get St. John's at home, and then they go to Marquette this week. If they can somehow go 2-0, I think they're right back in this story again.
Yeah, and
they go 0-2, and it could be.
Yeah, they've done this before.
Would you say 3 or 4 teams make it?
Yeah, they lost 6 in a row in December last year, the year before, when Kalkbrenner had mono. Anyway, I think Creighton will find their way there, so that should get the league 4, and then upside with the others.
Joby, real quick, you want to add one more team in?
Yeah, that it's unlikely because of overall record, but the team that has the best potential to actually make a run if they in conference can finally get it together is actually Butler. Because Butler is sitting there with 2 definitive tournament wins already out of conference and a 3rd against a bubble team in Northwestern. So while Butler, has the ugly Austin Peay loss in North Dakota State, if they make a run in the conference, we can start to ignore the other ones. And so they actually have opportunities that I think, unfortunately for Georgetown needs to go and win in stores, to kind of do it, or they're basically NIT bound. Butler has a foundation from which they can go, but of course, Butler, the way they've performed, could lose to Seton Hall real easy. So there you go.
Let's jump over to the ACC here, and
Right.
Greg's accomplished undefeated this week, so congratulations to it. 6-0.
Yeah, Louisville, an absolute second half meltdown where they were actually behind with less than 10 seconds to go and then hit a game-winning shot in the final seconds to win. Real light.
That's Louisville for you. A couple of teams I would do want to go through here. Titel, Duke Blue Devils. They didn't play this past week, but there they are, number 4 in the nation.
I think Coach John Shire should be able to handle the Hokies when Vatek comes to Durham on New Year's Eve, and then they head to SMU on Saturday. His only 2 losses, 5 points to Kentucky and Atlanta, 3 points to Kansas and Vegas. The defense has been dominant. Their KenPom defensive efficiency, number 1 in the nation, and it actually helps that the leader of it is the McDonald's All-American Cooper Flagg. He came into college with these super high expectations. He's met almost every one of them through his first 12 games. The shooting behind the arc needs to stop, frankly. 11 to 44, take it to the hoop. But 1.5 steals a game, 1.3 blocks a game. His defensive win shares, which measures like how your defensive is compared to other people, it's tied for the best in the nation. I only thought he was this like all-around offensive player. The kid plays D.
And they've won 6 in a row. Joby, that's second to SMU's 7-game winning streak in this conference. And did anybody see that coming?
No, and well, it's Virginia who's subpar for what they usually are this year, in Boston College. We won't get too excited, but SMU has actually developed, and they are right now creating a 5th ACC team in the field, which is shocking. Now, that's right now. I want to stress, Matt had a really good point when we were looking at the Big East. Oh, look, almost everybody is a road win, tier 1 loss. Not the case in the ACC. I mean, you stub your toe at Wake or Virginia or something like that, which is extremely possible, for one of these teams. I mean, SMU already has the Virginia win, but if Clemson were to fall off a cliff, or North Carolina, et cetera. These top 5, though, right now sit in the field. Bracket Matrix just had a SMU and the Ponies join. And what I like about this SMU team is they can get their scoring from anywhere. Like they are, for instance, against Boston College, they had 5 guys in double figures. And then but that didn't even include Traore, who's the leading scorer against Longwood. And so Andy Enfield has really created diversified offense that I think is very effective. Their defense is solid, but it does the job, especially on the inside. So this SMU team, as long as they take care of business and now they're in a position, don't lose bad games, which there are a lot of them in the ACC, then you might actually be getting a bit. And out of conference, the LSU and Washington State wins, those are teams right on the edge right now of the tournament as we sit right now. Washington State, I actually think, is taking the BYU role in the WCC and kind of that third team behind St. Mary's and Gonzaga.
I'd say real quick, if we could circle that game against Pittsburgh February 11th at home, because that should be tier 1, and that might be a must-win. I don't think they have a ton of tier 1 opportunities, but
I was going to say, let's just look at their next 2 games. They could split these 2 with Duke and Carolina. Yeah. Just get one of those 2 wins.
Yeah.
Then don't lose at home to Georgia Tech. I mean, that's the problem, is there's so many landmines, but avoid the landmines. You got to do it, but you can do it. I think they have a team that can avoid the landmines, because if one guy's cold, let's say you're playing one of these teams like a Notre Dame, and Shrewsbury's going nuts. Well, as long as you don't, the problem a lot of teams have is, their key cogs, their 1 or 2 key cogs are off on the same night. SMU's got 6 or 7 cogs, so that's nice for them.
Yeah, and here's the upcoming schedule of the ACC, and unlike some of these other leagues, I highlight the Duke SMU game on Saturday, and I don't even know that there's anything else here that is really worth watching. I mean, and that's kind of a shame for this conference here, because we've got so many teams with these bad nets, which I think is going to wrap back around to the whole point here, that you're not going to have those chances to build a resume with key wins. You're basically going to have to be avoiding bad losses.
Yeah. And let me also say, is in the years past, I've been very defensive of the ACC, saying, the net's screwing them. The net's not doing it right. No. The net's not that far off this year. I mean, to be very honest, the nets, these teams are, Notre Dame is the 92nd team. Virginia is the 102nd team. These nets aren't just so way off that it's contorting and hurting legitimate tournament teams like a Clemson, like a Pitt. No, Clemson, Pitt, you're not allowed to lose to Virginia Tech this year, period.
Yeah, just
here for ACC in both football and basketball.
Real quick note here, even though we did mention our under the radar, this is the first HoopsHD report since Jim Larinaga retired there at Miami. So he is gone.
He did it just to embarrass me. I said Miami was a sleeper team before the season started, and they're just trying to make me look stupid.
Let's move on to the American Conference. And Rocco, I want to bring you back in here on the American. Looking at this Memphis team, which when you look at these metrics here, including the KPI believes that this Memphis team is the number one
Oh,
team in the
wow.
entire nation. And quite frankly, I did my first bracket of the year the other day, and when I started looking at this Memphis profile, and I've been very critical of this team in years of the past, I can't be critical of this. I think that they're way better than the polls have them at 21 or 25 in the nation.
No, they had no gimmies. I mean, that makes a huge difference, right? So they just played 13 games with no gimmies, even slipped up in the Arkansas State example, went 10-3 overall. But now those three conferences I mentioned earlier, the SEC, the Big Ten, and Big 12, are going to play nothing but those types of games. So by the time we get to March, Memphis will be in the middle of that pack. They won't be near number one anymore. But they had to do it because look how bad the rest of the American is for the most part. I think everything that the American could have hoped for out of Memphis, they got. It's a needed bullseye. At least there's somewhat of an apple to bite out of if you're a North Texas, if you're a Wichita State. So there is some pathways now to get multiple bids for the league. But Memphis had to do it all themselves. They're clearly the team that schedules nationally, and they're the team that has by far the most talent. But with FAU reloading, South Florida going through tragedy, we're really down to just maybe 4 or 5 teams that can really compete with them. And we know Memphis. Here's the other side of that. We know who Memphis is. This happens every year. They're going to have a week or two during American play where they just suddenly lose to like East Carolina and everything gets screwed up. So I'm reserving judgment until we get a little further along.
But Rocco,
really?
if let me just,
Does this happen every year, though? Like, what happens every year is Memphis gets ranked really high and gets big accolades, but they've never gone out there and scheduled like this and won like this that I can recall. I mean, UConn, Michigan State, at
Last year.
Clemson, Ole Miss is really
Yeah,
good.
last year.
These are better wins than I ever recall them having, really, since the Calipari era. This is
Look at
good.
last year. They won. Last year they won at Texas A&M. They won at Missouri. They won at VCU. They played Clemson, Virginia, Vanderbilt at home. Beat all 3 of them. Beat Michigan and Arkansas on neutral courts. It was almost the same thing. The only difference is they added 2 SWAC schools. They got rid of the SWAC schools this year, but they were in amazing position last year. But then January 18th happened, Griggs. And guess what happened on January 18th? They lost at home to South Florida. Then they lost to Tulane. Then they lost to UAB. Then they lost to Rice. And the entire resume fell apart.
yeah,
That's my point.
and then they lost 3 more games the rest of the way. I mean, they ended up having
They were
so many
out of it.
conference losses but
Yeah.
on the other hand, Rocco, you were talking earlier about your record against that record against the top there, and we're pretty
Yeah.
much set. It's 8-2. There's no chance it's
Yeah.
going to be a losing record there. It's 8-2, and they're going to have an 8-2 record and all like good against meaningful competition at the end of the day here. And that gets you in the tournament, doesn't it? With a
It's
pretty
a
good
good
seed
start. But
too.
again, it's a great start. But every one of the losses that they would potentially take in this league, besides maybe road Wichita, road North Texas, are going to be those are going to be bigger punches to the gut than these teams at the top of the sport when they lose. So again, they should be in great shape. They should be able to get in. I just think their current standing, to me, it's still too early to do bracketology. But at their current standing, if they are a protected seed, it would be very difficult for them to sustain that. They thoroughly would have to dominate the league. And I think this league's too competitive and the travel's too hard to really dominate it. And Memphis has shown us that year after year after year.
Well, real quick here, Matt. Here's the upcoming schedule. Is there anything you're looking at this week, or anything in the American at all, other than Memphis's game on Sunday? It's Thursday and Sunday they play.
Well, I was gonna say, can North Texas be a team that if you go like 16-2, you get in the at-large conversation, and one of those 16 being Sunday would be very big for them.
Let's jump over to Joby's favorite league, the Mountain West, and Uh,
The Joby
and,
Fortune Trophy be awarded to the Mountain West tournament winner this year from HoopsHD.
and following a fun first day of well, it wasn't the first day of conference, it was a fun Saturday of conference play, Joby. The Mountain West is looking like another 8-bid league again this year, aren't they?
Well, I will say this. After their win in San Diego, Utah State, and what Utah State's also done out of conference, Utah State is very deserving. They're the team who needs to be in the top 25. We talk about, oh, we want Drake there. It's there. Utah State's the one that's getting jerked around, not in the top 25.
I agree.
And they're legit from what their resume has put together. And yeah, you can see the J&G has them 18. That I actually would agree. Usually the J&G overrates the Mountain West a little bit. I think 18 sounds pretty good for what they have done this year. And so, I give them a lot of credit. They earned that win in San Diego. They were the better team watching that game. It wasn't a fluke, even though it was a close game. To me, that tells me a lot. And by the way, UC San Diego, we were calling this a long way off. Remember that, guys? Everybody on this call is like, watch UC San Diego. UC San Diego is a 12 seed right now. That's that they not at large, but man, they're in that 12-5, and I might be picking them come March if they are a 12 seed in March. So I don't really find the UC San Diego loss devastating whatsoever.
Yeah, and obviously it wasn't under Jared Calhoun, but Utah State years had a history of garbage non-conference scheduling. They don't this is a solid non-conference schedule.
That's
It's not
very
great,
solid, yeah.
but Iowa, St. Mary's, the Bodies in North Texas, not great, but solid enough, Griggs, isn't it?
I'd say so. Absolutely. The only team, first of all, a lot of that was away from home. They're the only team that's in St. Bonaventure. That's a solid profile, and they are a solid team. And UC San Diego, I think, deserves to be inside the bubble. I know that the real committee may not have them there, but that's not a bad loss at all. And this is a really good team.
Well, Mike, what about the rest of the Mountain West here? We did see Boise State pick up a road win, New Mexico pick up a road win, Wyoming got the win over Nevada. Is there any other teams that you're looking at after Utah State and San Diego State?
I say Utah State, Boise State, New Mexico, and San Diego State, and that's really other than those four. I don't really see any teams that are going to be tournament worthy.
No, wait a minute. We have to talk about how people continue to cheat San Jose State.
We're running short on
There's the
time here,
buzzer.
Greg. So we let's take a quick look here at the upcoming schedule. We're back in conference play again here. Utah State is at Nevada on Tuesday, then hosting Fresno. Maybe though the game this week is probably going to be the San Diego State Boise State game, the huge one on I guess that's on Saturday.
Yes, and I think Rocco and Joby in the bracket, in the selection committee guessing experts would agree, Titel. That is a huge sense of urgency for that Boise State team.
Yes, agreed. They have a win. I mean, Boise does have that out of conference win needed to show, hey, we're real. They actually have two of them because they have St. Mary's and Clemson. So, but they're just not the opportunities that you often get in the Mountain West the last few years net wise. And right now, only Utah State and San Diego State are inside the bubble, and San Diego State's not far inside the bubble. So they need that if they want to be a part of this, because it's inevitable. Once again, Rocco mentioned travel in the American. Hell, don't tell me that going to Wyoming is a layup earlier in the week for Boise State. They could be coming off a loss before hosting San Diego State very easily, and that Wyoming loss will look bad. That Nets
Nobody gets higher than Wyoming.
Yeah, well,
I do.
What's crazy is the Nets still are overrated for the Mountain West.
Edibles.
Wyoming's worse than a 137, but 137 is still going to be bad on the resume.
I also highlight that
years past where it'd be 90 something.
I also highlight that Nevada New Mexico game Friday night. Nevada cannot be 0-3. They got some good metrics, but they can't start 0-3 in conference play and have any shot, I don't think.
And
New Mexico looking to go.
Their metrics are bogus. And Nevada, their metrics are the example of the old Mountain West bogus schedule. Oh, we got to win over Santa Clara. Great. No.
Over in the West Coast Conference, Titel, let me clear that off. Gonzaga did suffer the loss, but what about the Zags sitting there with the sixth best record of the conference right now?
So the bad news for Mark Few is that he's now 9-4 after the loss to UCLA and Inglewood. The good news, all 4 of his losses, single digits, away from home to top 50 KenPom teams. I don't know if they can go undefeated in conference play. This is not your old father's Gonzaga squad, but I think they're going to be favored in every single game the rest of the way. And if it goes down to the wire, the odds are in their favor. 81% at the free throw line is number 7 in the nation. You might remember a guy named John Stockton back in the day. He averaged a little over 5 assists a game during his 4 years at Spokane in the early 80s. Now, I'm not saying that returning first-team all-conference point guard Ryan Nembhard is better than his Hall of Fame predecessor, but his 10 assists per game is leading the country.
Well, not only are they top 50, Titel, UCLA, UConn, and Kentucky are likely close to protected seats. Those are not – that is – none of those losses are bad at all.
As far as the rest of these go, Rocco, is St. Mary's good enough to be an NCAA tournament team even so far from what we've seen this year, or is it maybe Washington State or San Francisco you're looking at?
Well, I think there's 6 teams total, and 2 through 6 right now are fairly even on paper. I think the benefit of the doubt, of course, goes to Randy Bennett and this formula that they seem to have these last 4 or 5 years in a row where they get really, really hot in conference play. I think the format's perfect for him with the Thursday, Saturday. Again, a little bit sluggish in the Pacific win on Saturday, but they got the job done. And now they get Pepperdine in Portland. There's some nice cushion here for them to get off to a good start before they eventually play San Francisco at home at the end of the month and go to Washington State. So the league did a lot of favors for both Gonzaga and St. Mary's. If you look at the January schedules, they by far have the easiest paths to get off to a good start. And I think that's good for television. But tonight we have Santa Clara and San Francisco just tipping off, a huge rivalry here locally. Washington State so far is the only team outside of those top 2, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, presumably, that has a quad 1 win and really impressive as far.
But is it Isaiah Watts hurt now though for them? Isn't that?
Yeah, he's been out for a few games, so they've been
Okay.
winning with his brother LaJuan Watts, of course, both sons of the great Slick Watts of the Seattle Sonics, and LaJuan's been amazing. So Washington State hit a wall, of course, in the Apple Cup game, got beat pretty bad by the Huskies. But bounced back nicely. I think they're very well coached. We'll see how this journey in the WCC goes. It's something that I think we're all intrigued by because Oregon State's home court advantage, although they're struggling with local Portland tonight, and Washington State, those are Power 5 venues, a lot different than these small Jesuit gyms across the rest of the landscape. So it's going to be really interesting. I think those 2 home courts could be good when the students are back for the Beavs and Cougs. But I think at the end of the day, those teams are so even, minus St. Mary's, that it's probably just going to be maybe 3 or 4 NIT teams. And I hope I'm wrong. But San Francisco, I think, has got the talent to do it. Unfortunately, with Chip's injury, Newberry, he's got an ACL. They're going to be a heavily defensive team going forward like they were against LMU the other night. And that's just going to lead to some patchwork all the way through the rest of the next 2.5 months. Probably just not enough there to beat Gonzaga or St. Mary's, which I think is required to get into the at-large picture.
Yeah. There is the upcoming schedule. We are to conference play, as you mentioned, as we record this. Both Washington State and Oregon State struggling at home early in their games, but there's a long way to go in those games. But none of maybe the San Francisco Washington State game Saturday might be the best one here on the schedule coming up. But one more league here. Let's quickly hit the A10. And while we've got the Bonnies and Rhode Island both with only 1 loss, Titel, how about George Washington? I don't think this is the first time I've mentioned their name all season.
You all thought Georgetown was the best team in DC. Let me give you Coach Chris Caputo, losing record last season, much like Ed Cooley. I assume that'd be the case again because Garrett Johnson tore his ACL last summer, but thanks to a little luck and a horrible strength of schedule, they're 11-2.
Yeah.
They head to Richmond on Tuesday to start conference play, and they've been doing it with their twin towers, Darren Buchanan Jr. and Rafael Castro, combining for 26 points and 16 boards a game. I have not made it to the Smith Center in person to see them yet in 2024. I will get to see them in 2025, and I'll discuss that a little more in my final thought.
All right. We've got also have a Matt. This Dayton team just missed out on being the top 25 this week, coming off a loss their last time out. But is this Dayton team, especially they don't have the predictive metrics? Not all the predictive metrics love Dayton, although Ken Palm really does. You're a predictive metric guy, so what are your thoughts on Dayton so far?
Well, unfortunately, I got to watch him firsthand against Marquette and have a great second half comeback to pull off a win that like that and UConn. Those are two strong wins when, especially we come down if they're on the bubble. Those are the type of wins that might carry the day for them.
Yeah.
So I think they probably will be just above the bubble. I see 7 to 9 seed roughly. So I mean, they were 17 last year, and I think something in that 7 to 9 range this year, as long as they do what they should in the A10 and don't take too many losses.
Yeah, the problem you have is kind of the problem we saw for Memphis, though. Don't we have it? When you look at what the rest of the schedule is, there's no more chances to do anything other than avoid bad losses.
Yeah, so like I said, that's what puts it. They'd probably be somewhere like a 7-8 seed if the selection show was today, and they have to hope the basis they probably can only afford 1 or 2 to wear at least the 7 range, and that they might be 8, 9 ish if they do. Even if they did last year, they actually might be at 10 or 11 if they did what they did last year in conference. They got to probably take a half step up from last year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. 'Cause I guess the only thing you say about the rest of the league is we do have some gaudy overall records at the top there, but not with very good metrics to back them up.
Well, not against very good metrics because they didn't come against very good schedules. And while I think that there's enough decency there to keep 1 or 2 teams solidly inside the bubble, I don't think it's going to collectively lift everyone. I mean, like Woody and GW played 2 of the 10 worst schedules assembled. VCU's and Loyola's weren't that much better. At the end of the day, it's impressive when all you've really done is win a bunch of games against weaker teams that 200 other teams would have probably posted those same records. I do think Dayton is legit. I know that they lost to Dayton. I think we've had a show since then, but I like them better than anyone else in the conference. I'm not going to predict that they'll run the table, but I think they'll run away from the rest of the league and be way, way, way inside the bubble and probably safely ranked in the teens by the end of the year.
There's the upcoming schedule on the screen real quick here. Dayton's games are LaSalle at home on Tuesday and at GW on Saturday. But on that note, that's all the teams for the day. So why don't we go ahead and jump right into final thoughts? Pull this down here. And Matt, why don't we start with you tonight?
Well, I want to follow up on we had a good discussion of the SEC. Is like, what is going to be the baseline? I think 6-12 is not going to be good enough unless you're Alabama, maybe, who played that monster schedule. But is it 7 wins? Is it 8 wins? It probably will depend on the team. But that's where when you set like a mark for these major conferences, in which there's 3 that looks like shine above the rest, it's what I think SEC, especially a 7-win team, will definitely be, I think, come in at some point. And then the other ones at 8 and 10 will probably get in. But like, it's just fine. It's basically fine that it'll still, I think, non-conference will matter. Like Cincinnati probably would not get in at 8 and 10. Where something like Kansas, I don't think Kansas goes 8 and 10. But hey, whatever happened, they go 8 and 10 because they played such a good non-conference schedule and got the wins. They would get in on 8 and 10.
I agree there. Titel.
Should be a very fun weekend in DC. I haven't done any doubleheaders yet this year. It's just in Georgetown, but I'm going to do a doubleheader within 24 hours this weekend. Xavier comes to town to face the Hoyas on Friday night at 8 o'clock. And then Saturday afternoon, I finally get to go to the Smith Center to see GW. But Chad, I forget where they're playing this weekend. Can you remind me?
What's that?
Oh, no, stop. No, stop it.
All right, I can't stop it. Let's figure this out here. Okay, there we go. Mike, how about you?
Well, we're gonna start to see the effects of the mega conferences.
I take it back. I don't like Dayton.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, as we go on, now we're going to start to see the effect of the mega conferences, the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, ACC. There's going to be a lot of cannibalism within these conferences. A lot of the teams that have clean records are not going to be so clean much longer. And I think this is the year where there'll be several teams four below conference still make the tournament, but it just depends on all the wins. It's about quality too. It's not just quantity.
Yes, agreed as well. Rocco.
Yeah, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Jalan Lowe of Pittsburgh. He's had an incredible sophomore campaign. A little bit review, but of course he was the MVP in the win in overtime at Ohio State. That is really putting the Panthers on the at-large map early on. Of course, they just have the two losses. Really nothing to frown about at Mississippi State and neutral Wisconsin in that championship game of Greenbrier. But I've been thoroughly impressed with Lowe. They have a lot of other options, including Ish Leggett, of course, at Pitt, and really important for the ACC. You know, Joby did a nice breakdown of SMU. I'm skeptical on their staying power just due to all the travel they're going to have to do from Dallas to both sides of the country, and then they also only get the top four, if you will. In my book, the top four is Duke, North Carolina, Clemson, and Pitt. The problem for SMU is they play all four of those teams only one time. So they're not maximizing their opportunities. So the pressure will be on. But in Pitt's case, I think they're set up pretty well to move forward. They'll get a few extra cracks versus what SMU has. And that road win at Ohio State, you would hope, could age pretty well. And you got to watch out for this guy, Jalan Lowe. He's just been absolutely phenomenal throughout the year. I think it's six MVPs, but in six of their more important games. Just a sophomore, really great breakout year happening for him. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was USC, of course, hasn't been tested since the home loss when they melted down. Probably should have beat Oregon. But these last four performances are breaking the performance metric charts. They're seventh in Torvik overall this last 4 or 5 weeks. But now they're put to the real test. They got Michigan on Saturday, as Michael well knows. And then they go to Indiana next Wednesday. Really curious to see if USC's newfound confidence, again, all 12 players, the entire staff are new. I'm really intrigued by this team because I think their ceiling could be high if they start to click in this level of competition.
All right. Joby.
A lot of our focus, rightfully so, has been on the SEC. And what has gotten our focus is both the number of bids that they're likely to receive, but also the clog. They're going to make up right now half of the protected seats right now. Right now. We'll see how it divides us out. But if you look at non-conference, the Big Ten isn't far behind in total bids. The Big Ten has a number of teams looking at bids, but only two, I would argue right now, are actually protected seats. And this is where the Big Ten better be thankful they post from the Pac-12 because both of them are 12 teams in Oregon and UCLA. So I guess we can't totally say the Pac-12 is dead and gone and buried when, after all, their teams are actually leading the way at one of the top two conferences this year.
Yeah, Joby, I actually put together like I mentioned, my first bracket of the year the other day. I had 13 SEC teams in. I had 12 Big Ten teams right behind it. But the big difference was I think I had one, maybe two protected seats for the Big Ten. I had 7 from the SEC. And it's kind of what we called at the beginning of the season. We thought that the Big Ten would get a lot of teams in. We just didn't think there was an elite team there. And there may not be. But Griggs, you want to finish the show out?
So I believe I think it hit the news today, or maybe it was yesterday. Leonard Hamilton is being sued by 6 former players from last year's team from lack of NIL payments. I believe the statement, I don't know all of the exact details, but I think that they were roughly promised $250,000 apiece. The payments didn't come. There were points during the season last year where they were threatening to walk out. There was a big game against Duke where they said that they weren't going to play. They had walked out of a practice. And while they did play and while all that stayed behind the scenes, that is looming. And it's sort of interesting because this is a common issue or problem that a lot of players are facing. They're being lured to schools. They're being told or at least led to believe that they're going to receive a lot of NIL money or other benefits and they're not getting them. I also need to say that the opposite of that is also true. A lot of players are receiving money and benefits, but then not performing the work that they said they would, be it signing autographs or being in pictures or whatever, to get that. So it's working both ways. Now, I don't think anyone can reasonably fault players for being upset for not being paid what they were expecting it to get or told that they would get. But you can have two ideas in your head at the same time, and that is, I know that this is a lot to get into for a final thought, but it's really frustrating for me to see how mismanaged or not managed at all and out of control college athletics has become, especially with football and men's basketball, but really across the board. I can't help but think, as we had been discussing for many, 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 many years, even on this show, that the NCAA should have taken preventative actions and made some and given them things and made some concessions long before now. Had they done that, I don't think they would have lost complete control. Essentially, they have no power to do anything now. And I don't know what needs to be done. I have a few ideas, but to have this happening to where we came very close to seeing a team not play in a game because we're going to walk out due to NIL disputes, I don't think that that's healthy. I don't. I'm not an enough wordsmith to say it other than that, but it's not good for the college game, and it doesn't feel the way college sports is supposed to feel.
Yeah, that it is, maybe something we'll get back to in the off season as well, because I do agree with you that um, there's problems here that I don't know that there's a solution for. And sometimes it's nice to just sit back and watch the games and not think about some of this
Yeah.
stuff until it rears its head again. But I do want to take this chance again to thank everybody for being with us throughout 2024. We'll be back on Thursday the 2nd with our Under the Radar podcast. Next Monday, actually, coming up Sunday night, I think is our first bracket rundown show, Griggs. Am I
It
right?
is. Oh, we're looking at Ty Tell's bracket. We new.
Yes, Sunday night, our new night for bracket rundown shows. Next Monday night with another Hoops HD report. But on behalf of John Teitel, Matt Sikowski, Mike Cha, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org, Joey Fortson, David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy all the games. We are getting really into the start of conference play now with everybody. By this weekend, we'll be into conference play, which is a great time of year. But enjoy the games and have a happy, healthy, safe new year, and we will see you all in 2025.